right, so this is going to be my second entry. This is just maybe a couple hours after the first one I made. Um, I watched this video between that last recording and now, um, where this guy was explaining that, like, I've watched a ton of videos about, like, anxiety and mental health and all this, and like, I've gone down that whole rabbit hole more than once, and this guy explained it in a way that I'd never heard before, and it made a lot of sense. He was saying that, like, when you're a kid, and let's say you experience something traumatic as a kid, and when you're a kid, trauma isn't what trauma is to adults. Trauma to a kid can be something as stupid as dropping a glass of milk. A kid drops a glass of milk, and his mom's right there, or his dad, or whatever, and their parent is like, "Oh, oh crap! Like, you dropped this milk. Like, oh, now I have to clean this up," and they're annoyed or whatever, which is a pretty normal reaction to that. But when you're a kid and you've dropped this glass of milk and you've seen your parent react that way, your first thought is, "Oh shit! I've just disappointed my parents. Um, they might, I don't know, if they get mad enough about that, they might kick me out of the house. They might punish me or do something." Let's just say the kid, worst case scenario, my parents are going to kick me out of the house and the kid's catastrophizing or whatever. In that kid's mind, he gets kicked out of the house, he's can't provide for himself, he's going to die. So now dropping this glass of milk in this kid's mind has now become a life and death situation. And that's just one incident of dropping a glass of milk. And you have hundreds of those throughout your childhood. And every single one of those is an opportunity for your stupid little kid brain to take those emotions that you're feeling in those situations and associate them with something that you shouldn't be. So, for example, a lot of my issues stem from. I've identified this from talking to counselors and just thinking about it for years, literally. A lot of my issues stem from when I was a kid. We used to always go on these camping trips with my mom's side of the family, and all of my uncles on that side of the family, I think they're good guys. I don't think any of them are actual assholes or anything, but for whatever reason, maybe they just identified some kind of weakness in me or something as a kid. I don't know, but they would, for the entire week or 2 weeks, however long these trips were, um, I would be the butt of every single joke. Um, every time I would open my mouth to say anything, everyone would just start laughing and tell me how stupid my opinion was and how that's just the dumbest thing they'd ever heard. And that happened from, I'd say, ages like maybe like 7, 8, 9 is when that started, to about 13 is when I started shutting off. Because what had happened is, when I was young and experiencing that amount of, like, I don't know, just being berated and essentially bullied by adults, um, I had associated the emotions I was feeling from that, which was typically anxiety for having to, like, sit around the fire in the evenings and go through this. I had no other choice. Like, I was a kid, I couldn't just go and leave. Like, I had to sit there. And having to be there is where a lot of my social anxiety stems from, is being forced to sit around those fires and being subjected to genuine harassment by adults that, when you're a kid, you think are supposed to love you and care for you, and instead they're abusing you and treating you like a piece of shit. So when you go through something like that as a kid, you learn to associate those emotions you felt, that anxiety I felt sitting there. Your brain tells you that, hey, I didn't like feeling those emotions. I'm going to now do everything I can for the rest of my life to never experience that again. Which is very bad because emotions have purpose, right? Like anxiety has a purpose. Anxiety is this is still like a bit of a philosophical thing I still think about often, but to my understanding, the purpose of anxiety is to tell you when something is not right. That's very vague, I know, very open, but anxiety and paranoia are quite intertwined in that aspect. They're just meant to tell you when something's not right. And it doesn't mean something's not right. It's just your brain has interpreted the situation as something's not right. Or you're just very uncomfortable in that particular situation. Again, something's not right. Your brain's registering that. So, yeah, as an adult, how do you really reverse that? That's now the point I'm till. I've identified what caused my issues. I've identified the emotional pathways that my brain is taking, the mental gymnastics that my brain does to try to work through these emotions. I've identified all of that. But the only thing I'm left with is how do I actually reverse it? How do you reverse the damage? And this guy in this video I was watching, he was saying that, like, what works for a lot of people is to treat your emotions like they're your children. Each emotion is a child, right? And we think of our emotions as either being good emotions or bad emotions. But we don't typically, a good parent at least, like I don't have kids. If you don't know me, I don't have kids, but like I know enough about like life to know this. A good parent doesn't say these are my good kids and these are my bad kids. A good parent doesn't do that. A good parent doesn't pick favorites. So why do we do that with our emotions? Our emotions are essentially like our inner children, right? So you don't say, we shouldn't be saying what this guy in this video said is that we shouldn't think of it as anger and sadness and all of these negative emotions. We shouldn't be thinking of those as bad emotions because they serve a purpose. When you think of them as bad emotions, you're always trying to push them away and like push them down. And you do that for 10, 15 years if you're me. And then when those emotions do come to the surface eventually, and they always will, you now have no idea how to handle them properly because you haven't been dealing with them for the last 10, 15 years. You've been completely emotionally numb. And now that you're trying to work on yourself and turn back into like a normal functioning member of society, it's very difficult because, again, you're working from a deficit. Yeah, so I don't know. That is definitely the next step in my journey is just figuring out how to get back. It's like that Pink Floyd song. Is it Hotel California? We got to get back to the place we were before. Yeah, I think of that every time I hear that song. So yeah, that's my next goal. Just got to actually figure out how to do it. That's another thing I've learned too is don't try to fix all of your problems at the same time. That does not work. So what I like to do, and so, like recently I've started doing this, is I'll work on one thing and then I take a break from working on myself. And then I go and work on another thing when it comes up. And then I just do it as they come. Because what I used to do is just try to fix every aspect of my messed up life at the same time. And that is so overwhelming when you're trying to improve your diet and you're trying to exercise more, you're trying to sleep better, you're trying to stop smoking, you're trying to quit drinking, you're trying to stop smoking weed, you're trying to do all these things, quit masturbating, you're trying to do all this shit. And You try doing it all at once, quitting coffee too, all of this at once, you will go insane, trust me. That much like accumulated withdrawal symptoms from all that, like you have to be a very mentally strong person to handle that. So my advice is to anyone, and I'm saying this mostly just for myself, because probably nobody's ever going to see this. Um, my advice to myself or anyone who might ever see this is work on one thing at a time. Take it slow. Don't rush it. Because if you rush it, you can end up doing more damage to yourself than good. So yeah, moral of this recording, take your time, focus on one aspect of your messed up life at a time. Um, Treat your emotions like they are children that need to be not neglected and shoved in a closet, but nurtured and loved. Um, when an emotion does come up that you don't necessarily want, I guess you could compare that to like if your kid does something stupid or like throws up all over your rug or something dumb like that. Instead of getting super mad at them, something that they couldn't necessarily control or help, because again, like your child's stupid actions, your emotions are involuntary. Um, Instead of getting mad at them, like just don't. Like learn to accept what happens for what it is. Like when your emotions come bubbling up to the surface, don't try to shove them down back down to wherever hole they bubbled up from. Um, think about them, analyze them. If you're in public when this happens, get somewhere quiet and just think, why am I feeling this way? What is causing this? Okay, that's causing it. Okay, well, why is that causing it? And keep asking. Do that the thing that you did when you were a kid, where you always ask why to everything. Why? Oh, because of this. Why? Because of this. Why? Do that with yourself. Do that with your own emotions and your own mental state. Oh, I'm feeling this way. Why? Oh, it's because of this. Why is it because of that? For this reason. Why? And just keep going down, and you'll eventually get down further and further and further until you eventually, ideally, identify the root of the problem. And that root of that problem might not be something that you want to admit to yourself. Particularly if you're a substance user, that root of your problem might be something that, yeah, you really don't want to admit to yourself, because you know that you deep down you know. Most of the time you know what your problem is. You just don't want to admit it to yourself. So yeah, do some soul searching, ask why, treat your emotions like they're your children. And yes, I'm looking at notes here. I was taking notes when I watched the guy's video before. Um, yeah. Anything else I was going to talk about? No, I think that pretty much covers it for this recording. I'm pretty much taking, because I mentioned in the first recording that I took the day off work to get my head right. I'm definitely feeling a lot better than I did this morning, that's for sure. But yeah, I might make another recording or two today yet, just as I continue to find things and learn new things. Because I think a video journal like this, I think it could help as a reference to look back on. Um, but it's oddly therapeutic. Because for a while, this is now, I'm going off on a tangent now, by the way, we're no longer really talking about mental health. Um, a few months ago, I tried my hand at live streaming, and I noticed that I only did a few streams, and I kind of lost interest, but I noticed that talking even to nobody, like nobody was watching my live stream, but talking as if there were people watching, just kind of like I'm doing now. Like I'm most likely never going to show anybody these recordings, but just sitting down and talking, like it's oddly therapeutic, especially for someone like me who hasn't really, I don't socialize with anybody, I don't talk to anybody, so it's nice to just talk. I don't know. I could talk to like my coworkers at work, but the main guy I work with, he's really annoying. And if you start a conversation with him, he's the kind of guy that just hijacks the conversation and then just goes on and on and on about things that you clearly have no interest in. Your facial expressions are just like leave me alone. And the guy's just going like in the most autistic way possible, just on and on and on, kind of like I'm doing now. Yeah, I don't know. My head is so all over the place this morning. If you can't tell, like my thoughts are jumping from one thing to another. My brain has been scrambled the last few weeks. This last spiral was triggered by I know exactly what triggered it. It's when I bought I was going to go camping with my family, and I bought a one of those disposable like dab pens, like weed, like vape pens, and I was going to use that in the evenings just to like puff on and just chill out and stuff. And I ended up getting sick the second day of camping, and I went home, and then I still had this dab pen. So I was just sitting at home, and I was also on vacation for the next 2 weeks after that camping trip. I work at a factory, and the factory was shut down for 2 weeks, so I was on vacation, and so I just sat there smoking this dab pen, and it made my tolerance, my weed tolerance, so high that it was like unsustainable. And then I to the point where regular weed wasn't doing it anymore, so I had to go buy another dab pen. And then I smoked that entire dab pen, which was twice the size of the first one. The second one I bought was bigger, so I smoked both of those dab pens in the course of like 2 weeks, and that might not sound like a lot to most of you, but the first one was a 1 gram dab pen, and the second was a 2 gram dab pen. So that's 3 grams of dab in 2 weeks for someone who doesn't really smoke very much weed at all. Like I smoke very little weed anymore. I used to smoke a lot, but now I smoke very little. And so yeah, that was a lot, and it jacked my tolerance through the roof, which then caused my anxiety to go through the roof. Because for me, like when I smoke a lot of weed, I tend to get like a lot of anxiety. My heart starts going crazy, and it's just I get like cold sweats and stuff. And so yeah, then experiencing those symptoms then triggered even more anxiety, and then it just created this like self-feeding loop where I eventually ended up in me going into almost like a manic state for like the last 2 weeks or so. And I think that manic state ended yesterday because today I feel normal. Um, but for the last 2 weeks, I was barely sleeping. I was barely eating. I had cold sweats the entire 2 weeks. Like I was freezing cold. Well, I was switching back and forth between freezing cold and boiling hot. But no matter what I was feeling, I was just sweating the entire time. Um, I think it's. I also had very little inhibitions. Like, and I was almost verging on delusional at times. Like I'd catch myself thinking like weird things, like because I'd mentioned I think in the first recording, I don't think it was in this one, but I mentioned that like a week ago, I had like thought, oh, I'm gonna go find a girlfriend, right? So what I did, like looking back, like this is pretty delusional. I I was like, hey, I want to like I like hiking, right? So I was like, oh, I'm gonna go to the local park and go for a hike, and maybe I'll bump into a girl. And during the drive there, I had like more and more like convinced myself that not only did I have the chance of bumping into a girl, but I was going to like 100%. Like it was going to happen. Like I was gonna be like I wasn't gonna be single anymore. I had like convinced myself this in my head, and then I go for the hike, and obviously there was no girl. But yeah, it's I'm fairly certain like that's not normal for me to be having delusional episodes like that. Like that's I I have mental health issues, but I'm not that unwell. Um, so yeah, once that happened, I realized, oh, I think I might be in some kind of manic state here. And exploring and researching the whole manic state stuff, that's very new to me because I've always just assumed that I had some kind of anxiety disorder. That's what I always thought. But I watched a podcast. Andrew Huberman. He does a he has a really good podcast, and he had an episode on bipolar disorder, and I watched it. Oh, sorry, hiccups. And I watched his bipolar podcast, and what he was describing, He also talked briefly about borderline personality disorder, which I'm still not totally sure what that is. But I remember thinking that both the bipolar disorder, there's type 1 and type 2, I forget which one, and borderline personality disorder sounded very, very similar. Like a combination of those two symptoms sounds exactly like what I have. Because just the general anxiety doesn't quite match what I experience. Like, that's why when I was diagnosed with general anxiety disorder, I didn't really buy it. Like, at the time, I was having crazy panic attacks and stuff, so I totally see how the doctors would have been like, oh yeah, this guy's just having like anxiety, he has anxiety disorder. But I think there might be more than that going on, because if it was just an anxiety disorder, you would think that medication would have helped, and it didn't. All these other things that I do on a daily basis to try to keep myself mentally healthy should be helping for someone who just has anxiety. So I think that I might have a deeper underlying issue. Um, yeah, yeah. Like I said earlier, I forget again which recording it was in, but about trying to fix your broken computer by troubleshooting with your broken computer. That's what I'm doing, trying to fix my broken brain from within my broken brain by just thinking about my own situation and condition. It's very difficult. There's a reason this is taken years to do, and I have come a long way. I a few years ago I would never even been making a video like this. Like, never even would have crossed my mind. I was a mess. There was a period a few years ago where I didn't leave my house for like 6 months, because I every time I would even think about leaving my house, I would just have a panic attack, and I would just like, oh well, I'll stay home then. Like, it was bad. So, and like, if anyone does watch, if anyone is watching this, like, that I know, like my family members or something, like in the future, you have no idea how bad it actually was. It was so bad that I don't even know how to describe it. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I feel like I've repressed a lot of that time during the periods where it was really bad. I feel like there's just big empty spaces in my memory that I just don't remember from those periods of my life, which would lead me to believe it was probably very bad. And the parts I do remember weren't good. So yeah, my advice to anyone who is going through similar shit to me, like, if anyone does hear this ever, and you you've been going through something similar to me, like you resonate with what I'm saying here, my advice to you would be, particularly if you're younger, like a teenager or a young adult, um, stop trying so hard. When I first identified that I had issues like this, like mentally, I I kind of freaked out and started trying to do everything I could to fix myself. And it ended up making it worse. It actually ended up triggering like a full blown mental breakdown, but that's besides the point. Um, yeah, take it easy, and take it easy on yourself. Like, don't be hard on yourself about these things. I'm not going to say you can't help it, because I don't know your situation, but we do naturally just beat ourselves up over stuff like this, even if it is completely, we know fully in our hearts that it's not our fault. We did nothing to bring this on ourselves. This is just, even if you're in this, like, I personally, my issues are 50%, but this is just what I believe, 50% the things that happened to me in my childhood, and 50% stupid decisions I made as a teenager and a young adult. It's half my fault and half my environment's fault that I grew up in. That's how I see it. Where was I going with this? Oh yeah, don't blame yourself. Unless it really is your fault, in which case you know it's your fault. Like if you're smoking like a shitload of weed and jerking off like 3 times a day, and you're like, oh, why do I have anxiety? Why am I depressed? You just answered your own question. You know if you're doing that kind of shit and you're experiencing all these mental health problems, you know that that's why. You just don't want to admit it to yourself because you're too scared to take a tolerance break. Because when you take a tolerance break, you have crazy anxiety and it gets way worse. So, oh, and there's someone who smoked weed for like 11, 12 years, something like that, like daily. For tolerance breaks, you don't, especially if you're someone who's very prone to anxiety and panic attacks and stuff, I wouldn't recommend quitting cold turkey for a tolerance break. Um, I would recommend trying to wean off. What I do, and actually I have one going right now. What's the information I want to cover on this paper here? Okay, there. Yes, here I have this little thing on this paper where this hoots, and I have the dates all written here, and this is mirrored. It's hard to point when everything's mirrored and backwards. But yeah, I have the dates written here, and then I put a tally right there next to each date for how many times I smoke weed in that day. And as you can see, I only started this 2 days ago because this is the third day. Um, because I'm still trying to lower my tolerance from when I was taking those I was smoking those dab pens, because that is what triggered my spiral, this latest spiral. So yeah, I'm just monitoring my rips here. You can see I took 6 on the 22nd, which is 2 days ago. Yesterday I had 5, and today I've had 1. I took one small one in the morning just to kind of settle my nerves, and so I could like think clearly about this stuff. You can probably tell a big difference between my first recording and the second recording. The first recording, I was in a bad place in my head, and this one I'm feeling much better. I feel kind of happy right now, which is odd. I don't feel happy often, so when I do, it's strange to me. Um, but yeah, lower your tolerance if you're a chronic weed smoker, and if you're a coomer, quit jerking off so much. Both those things will help your anxiety to go down, and depression as well if you struggle with that. But don't quit cold turkey with the weed, because it can be pretty bad. Last time I quit cold turkey, for 2 weeks, I probably averaged maybe like 300 or 400 calories a day. Like I was barely able to eat. Like I could barely get anything down. I was sleeping like, I don't know why I'm still holding this up. I was sleeping like maybe an hour or two a night for 2 weeks. If you've ever had insomnia or anything like that, and like you know how hard that is, or what that does to your system when you sleep that little, it's very damaging. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend quitting cold turkey if you're a stoner. Wean yourself off. And also, I've had many different addictions throughout my life. The weed, cigarettes, alcohol, pornography, all kinds of different addictions, like the typical 4 that every young man has. Um, what I found to work better than just quitting an addiction is to replace it with a new addiction that's less harmful. If you can't quit, replace the addiction with something else. Like I started smoking cigarettes when I was 14. Um, I then switched to vaping, Nord Gang. Uh, yeah, I switched to vaping, and because it's less harmful and it's a lot cheaper too. I live in Canada, and cigarettes are freaking expensive. They're like $20 a pack now. It's just stupid. And this bottle of vape juice, which lasts me like a week and a half, almost 2 weeks, is like less than $30. And that pack of cigarettes, you're smoking that in 2 days. So yeah, it's not really very cost effective. So yeah, replace your addictions and bad habits with a different addiction or a different bad habit that's not quite as bad. That's another piece of advice I'd have that I've learned from my years of um, suffering. um, and that also reminds me of another piece of advice. It's an old saying. I don't remember where I heard this from. It's probably some wise old man or an uncle or something. Um, a smart man learns from others. No, hold on. I screwed that up. A smart man learns from his mistakes. A wise man learns from the mistakes of others. I love that saying. That applies to so many different aspects of life. A smart man learns from his mistakes. A wise man learns from others' mistakes. You don't have to make your own mistakes to learn. Making mistakes is the most effective way to learn something. Failure is the best teacher, without a doubt. Um, but you don't have to fail. You can cut that entire part out by learning from people like me. People who have been there, done that, been through the shit, so you don't have to. I wish there were more people that would make videos like this. And now that I'm thinking about it, I really almost feel like I have a moral obligation to upload this. If it could even help one person. So I might upload this. I'll maybe watch it through to make sure I didn't like leak anything, and then I might upload it to my channel. I don't know. So yeah, learn from my mistakes. Learn from the mistakes of those around you. Um, yeah, I've been going for like half an hour already. I think I'm going to end this recording. I might make another one. I don't know. Who knows if anyone will ever even see this. If you do, have a good day.